My wife told me, I'll have an affair if you have an affair. Deal? No, absolutely not a deal. Why would I want to do that? I looked up confused as she shut me up. She said, a couple of rich swingers had offered us $500,000. $500,000 just for one night with each of us separately. I asked, what do we have to do? Sleep with them, dummy. Hurry up and put on a suit. The limo will pick you up in an hour. She was already heading to our bedroom, pulling out her nicest dress. I followed her, still protesting, but she showed me their profiles. Beautiful people with obvious wealth. Photos from private jets and yachts. The money had already been partially wired as a good faith deposit. $50,000 sitting in our account right now. The rest would come after tonight. We needed this money desperately, but this felt wrong on every level. Zoe kissed me and told me it's just one night, but she didn't know it'd be our last. The first limo arrived at 7 p.m. sharp. Zoe wore a black cocktail dress, kissed me goodbye at the door, and whispered to just have fun, and it would all be worth it by morning. My ride came 30 minutes later. Inside, a woman named Liberty was waiting in a red dress that probably cost more than my car. She had perfect teeth and perfect hair and perfect everything. The champagne she poured tasted expensive. I drank it too fast, trying to calm my nerves. She asked if I was excited, and I nodded like an idiot. Asked if I'd done this before, and I shook my head. Asked what I thought of her, and I mumbled something about her being pretty while staring out the window. You and your wife both have amazing bodies, so we figured you two were the perfect couple for us to explore. Liberty refilled my glass and gave me a kiss. I tried not to think about anything except the money, but my other head also wanted her. $500,000 would change everything. The limo drove for over an hour and passed through iron gates onto a private road lined with ancient trees. The manor at the end looked like something from a movie like Saltburn. Inside, Liberty led me through empty hallways past room after room of covered furniture. The silence felt heavy and wrong. The bedroom she brought me to was bigger than our entire apartment. A 4-poster bed dominated the space. Heavy curtains blocked out the night. Everything smelled like dust and expensive perfume. Liberty touched my shoulder gently and said she needed a moment to get ready. Let me get undressed. She walked into the bathroom, leaving me alone. I sat on the bed and pulled out my phone for the first time since getting in the limo. My heart stopped when I saw the screen. 15 missed calls from Zoe and a bunch of messages. I opened them with shaking fingers. The first few were confused. This isn't the address they gave me. Then worried. Why aren't we going to the city? Then panicked. They're not taking me to a hotel. The messages got worse from there. Get out of there. They left me in the woods. Please pick me up. I'm scared. Something's wrong. This isn't what we thought. I tried calling her back but had no signal. I moved around the room holding my phone up, desperately searching for bars. Nothing worked. The house must have been in a dead zone, but those texts had come through somehow, which meant she'd had signal wherever they dumped her. The bathroom door opened, interrupting my panic. Liberty walked out, but she wasn't alone. Her husband was with her. They both wore regular clothes now and carried long kitchen knives. Your wife was fun to hunt. We'll give you 10 minutes staring now. Liberty checked her expensive watch. Better run fast. Your wife only lasted 30 minutes before we caught up. I didn't even process what she said about Zoe. My body just moved on its own, and I bolted straight for the bedroom door while they stood there laughing at me. My hands were shaking so bad, I could barely grab the doorknob, and it took me 3 tries to turn it right. The metal was slippery with sweat from my palms, and when I finally got it open, I stumbled into the hallway. Behind me, Liberty said something about starting the count, and I heard her husband's voice joining in with the numbers. The hallway stretched out in front of me and looked nothing like what I remembered from walking here with Liberty just minutes ago. All the doors looked the same, and the carpet runner went both directions into darkness. I picked left and started running as fast as I could in my dress shoes that had zero grip on the old wooden floors. My feet slipped with every step, and when I tried to take the corner at the end of the hall too fast, I went sliding into the wall hard enough to knock a picture frame off. The glass shattered, and I kept going, hearing them still counting behind me, making sure I knew exactly how much time was left. 8 minutes now. 7.5. Their voices carried through the old house like they were using microphones or something. I found another hallway that looked exactly like the last one, more closed doors, more darkness, and I was already lost in this huge place. Then I saw a door that looked different, smaller and painted green instead of the dark wood like all the others. I yanked it open and found a narrow stairwell going down with bare concrete steps. I took them 3 at a time, using the metal railing to swing myself around the landings, and on the last set, my foot missed a step completely. My ankle rolled hard to the side, and pain shot all the way up to my knee, but I couldn't stop now. I pushed through the heavy door at the bottom and stumbled into what had to be a kitchen from another century. Everything was huge, industrial-sized stoves and sinks and prep tables all covered in white sheets like ghosts. Dust flew up when I bumped into one of the tables, and I had to cover my mouth to keep from coughing. On the wall next to the stove was a magnetic strip holding knives, and I grabbed the biggest one I could see. The blade was dull when I tested it on my thumb, probably just for decoration, but it was better than having nothing at all. Through the kitchen window, I could see absolutely nothing except darkness, and the outline of trees that seemed to go on forever. Zoe was somewhere out there in those woods, had been for at least 30 minutes according to what Liberty said. I ran to the back door and grabbed the handle, but it wouldn't budge. There was a deadbolt that needed a key from both sides, and no key anywhere I could see. I pulled out my phone to check for signal again, but still had nothing, not even one bar. The timer in my head said I had maybe 7 minutes left, probably less, since I'd already wasted time being lost upstairs. I started checking every door and cabinet in the kitchen, most of them locked or leading to storage rooms full of more covered furniture. Then I found a narrow door that opened into a pantry lined with empty shelves. At the far end was a window about 2 feet wide and 3 feet tall, just big enough for me to squeeze through if I could get it open. The latch was painted over with probably 20 coats of old paint and wouldn't move at all when I tried to turn it. I used the dull knife to start chipping away at the paint, digging into the layers as fast as I could. Paint chips flew everywhere and got in my eyes and mouth. My fingers started bleeding where I was gripping the knife too tight and using too much pressure. After what felt like forever but was probably 2 minutes, the latch finally broke free, and I shoved the window open. Cold air hit my face and I could smell pine trees and wet earth. I went feet first through the window, holding onto the sill until the last second before letting go. The drop was way further than I expected, at least 8 feet, and I landed hard on my already messed up ankle. The pain was so bad I had to bite down on my tongue to keep from screaming. I tasted blood and realized I'd bitten it hard enough to break the skin. I was in some kind of garden area with raised beds full of dead plants and a stone path leading toward the tree line about 50 yards away. My ankle felt like it was on fire, but I had to move. I started running, or trying to run, but it was more like a fast limp with my bad foot barely touching the ground. The grass between the garden and the woods was soaking wet with dew, and my dress shoes had absolutely no grip at all. I went down hard the first time about halfway across, landing face first in the grass and getting a mouthful of dirt. Got back up and kept going. Fell again 10 feet from the trees, this time landing on my hands and knees, ripping my suit pants and scraping my palms raw on something sharp in the grass. By the time I made it into the woods, I was covered in mud and grass stains, and blood from various cuts and scrapes. Once I was in the trees, I stopped for a second to listen and try to figure out where I was. The woods were thick and dark, and went in every direction as far as I could see. Zoe's texts said they'd dumped her somewhere in these woods, but that could be anywhere in what looked like miles of forest. I called out her name as quietly as I could, barely above a whisper, scared that Liberty and her husband would hear me, but more scared of not finding Zoe. No response except the sound of wind in the trees. Something big crashed through the bushes to my right, and I spun around, gripping the dull knife so tight my knuckles went white. My heart was pounding, so hard I thought it might explode, but it was just a deer, a big one with antlers, and it looked at me for a second before jumping away into the darkness. I had to lean against a tree to keep from falling over, my whole body shaking now from adrenaline and fear and pain from my ankle. I pushed off the tree and kept moving deeper into the woods. The darkness was so thick I could barely see my own hands in front of me. Then I remembered something about Zoe's fitness tracker. She always wore it, and the thing would glow green when she moved her wrist. I started scanning the darkness for any tiny light while pushing through bushes and low branches. Pine needles scratched my face and caught on my torn suit jacket. My ankle throbbed with every step, but I forced myself to keep going. Behind me, way back toward the manor, I heard doors slam open so hard they hit the walls. Liberty's voice carried through the night air. "Time's up. Ready or not, here we come." Her husband laughed and whooped like this was the best night of his life. They sounded pumped up and excited like kids at a theme park. I moved faster even though my ankle felt like someone was stabbing it with a hot knife. The ground sloped down and I heard water running somewhere ahead. I pushed through a thick wall of bushes and found a small stream cutting through the forest floor. The water was maybe 3 feet wide and moving pretty fast over rocks. Maybe Zoe had found this same stream and followed it. I stepped into the freezing water and my dress shoes filled up immediately. The cold shot up my legs, but I started following the stream anyway. That's when I heard the dogs. Not regular barking, but that deep baying sound hunting dogs make when they're tracking something. My stomach dropped because now this wasn't just two crazy people with knives. I kept moving along the stream edge, trying to stay quiet while water sloshed in my shoes. Something white caught my eye on a branch hanging over the water. I grabbed it and my hands shook when I realized what it was. A piece of Zoe's black cocktail dress, the white lining torn and hanging from where she must have snagged it running. The fabric pointed downstream, so I followed that direction. The dogs sounded closer now, maybe only a few hundred yards back. I needed to break my scent trail, or they'd lead Liberty and her husband right to me. I waded into the deeper part of the stream where the water came up to my knees. The cold was so bad I gasped and almost yelled out, but I forced myself to move upstream instead of down, going against where the fabric pointed. Water soaked through my pants and the current pushed against my legs. After maybe 100 yards, I climbed out on the opposite bank. My ankle had gone numb from the cold, which actually helped with the pain. I pushed through more bushes, and that's when I heard it. Soft crying, barely louder than the wind in the trees. I froze and listened harder. The crying was coming from behind a bunch of fallen trees piled up like a wall. I crept closer and whispered Zoe's name as quiet as I could. The crying stopped for a second, then got louder. I came around the fallen trees and found her wedged into a hollow between the roots. Her black dress was ripped to shreds and covered in mud. When she saw me, she started sobbing harder and reached out with both arms. I pulled her out of the hole and she collapsed against me. Blood covered her legs and arms from dozens of scratches. A deep cut on her thigh was still bleeding pretty bad. I checked her over quick while she clung to me, shaking. "Can you walk?" She nodded and stood up on shaky legs. They gave me 10 minutes, then let the dogs loose. Her voice was raw from crying. I crossed the stream over and over, but they kept finding me. She pointed back the way I'd come from. "We can't go that way. That's where they are." She grabbed my arm hard. I saw a road when they first dumped me, before I doubled back to hide. We started moving together with her leaning on me for support. My ankle screamed with the extra weight, but I didn't care. The dogs were definitely tracking us now. Their baying got louder, and I could hear Liberty and her husband calling out directions to them. We pushed through the undergrowth as fast as we could manage. Then the dogs sounded way too close, maybe only 50 yards behind us. I looked around desperate, and spotted a tall pine tree with branches low enough to grab. We need to climb. I helped boost Zoe up to the first branch even though my ankle almost gave out. She pulled herself up and I followed, using mostly my arms to haul myself from branch to branch. We climbed until the branches got too thin to hold our weight. From up here, maybe 30 feet off the ground, we could see everything. Flashlight beams swept through the forest below us like searchlights. Liberty and her husband were taking their time, walking slow and calling out to us. "You two are lasting longer than the others." Liberty's voice was sing-song and happy. Most couples don't make it past the stream. They were maybe 200 yards away and closing in. The dogs circled below our tree, jumping up and barking like crazy, while their claws scraped against the bark. Liberty's husband looked up at us through the branches and started laughing. "Smart move, but we've done this before." He grabbed the lowest branch and started pulling himself up, while Liberty stood guard below with her knife ready. My hands searched around for anything I could use as he climbed closer. I found a thick, dead branch about 3 feet long and yanked it free from where it was stuck between two trunks. His face appeared through the pine needles maybe 6 feet below us, grinning like this was the best part of his night. I waited until he reached for the next branch up, then swung the dead wood down as hard as I could. It connected with his face and made a sound like hitting a watermelon with a bat. He fell backward through the branches, cursing and grabbing at anything to slow his fall before hitting the ground hard. Blood poured between his fingers as he held his nose, and Liberty screamed up at us. "You're going to pay for that!" She knelt beside him, checking his face while he rolled around, groaning. We used their distraction to start climbing down the opposite side of the tree as fast as we could. Zoe went first, and I followed, pine needles scratching our faces and hands as we dropped from branch to branch. We hit the ground running, but only made it about 50 feet before my ankle gave out completely. I went down face first into the dirt and leaves, pain shooting up my leg so bad I wanted to scream. Zoe grabbed my arm trying to pull me up, but I could barely put any weight on my left foot. She wouldn't leave me even when I told her to run. Instead, she ducked under my arm and took most of my weight as we started hobbling together toward where she'd seen the road earlier. Behind us, Liberty's husband was shouting that he was going to make this hurt now, his voice thick and wet from the blood in his nose. The dogs were loose again, and we could hear them crashing through the bushes, getting closer every second. We pushed through a thick wall of bushes and stumbled out onto a narrow paved road. No streetlights, no houses, just empty asphalt stretching in both directions under the stars. Zoe pulled out her phone and held it up, checking for signal. One bar flickered on and off. She typed fast, sending a 911 text with our rough location before the signal died again. We started moving down the road, staying close to the tree line in case we needed to hide again. Every shadow looked like them catching up. Every sound made us freeze and look back. My ankle throbbed with each hop, and Zoe was basically dragging me at this point. Headlights appeared in the distance, coming our way. We moved into the middle of the road, waving our arms like crazy. The car sped up instead of slowing down and swerved around us at the last second, the driver probably thinking we were drunk or trying to rob them. We kept limping along with Zoe, supporting almost all my weight now. Then the dogs burst out of the trees onto the road behind us. Liberty and her husband followed right after. His face was covered in blood that looked black in the darkness, and he walked funny like maybe I'd messed up his balance when I hit him. But he still had that knife, and they were only about 100 feet behind us now. Another set of headlights came around the curve ahead. This time, Zoe didn't wait to see if they'd stop. She stepped right into the middle of the road, forcing the pickup truck to either stop or run her over. The truck's brakes squealed as it came to a stop just a few feet from her. An older guy rolled down his window, already yelling, "What the hell are you doing?" Zoe screamed back that someone was trying to kill us, pointing behind us at Liberty and her husband who were getting closer. The driver looked at us, saw the blood on our clothes and the tears in Zoe's dress, then looked past us at the two people with knives walking toward us with their dogs. "Get in the truck bed, quick!" We scrambled over the tailgate just as Liberty and her husband reached the edge of the road. Liberty put on this perfect smile like she was at a dinner party and called out to the driver, "Those two broke into our house! We caught them stealing!" The driver, who we'd later learn was named Xavier Briggs, looked at our injuries again, then at their knives and hunting dogs. "Well, I'll let the police sort that out then." He put the truck in gear and started driving while Liberty and her husband shouted threats behind us. We lay in the truck bed holding each other, too scared to even sit up and look back. Xavier drove for about 10 minutes before pulling into a small gas station with a single pump out front and a faded sign that said Briggs Fuel and Food. He helped us climb out of the truck bed, and my ankle nearly gave out when I put weight on it. Zoe grabbed my arm to steady me while Xavier unlocked the station door and flipped on the lights. The place smelled like motor oil and old coffee. He went straight to the phone behind the counter and dialed 911 while we stood there dripping mud and blood on his clean floor. I heard him tell the dispatcher about finding two people running from attackers with knives and dogs. He gave them the address and hung up before turning to us. "Police will be here in 20 minutes. He walked to the back door and shouted toward a small house behind the station. A woman in pajamas and a robe came running across the yard carrying a first aid kit. Xavier introduced her as his wife Valeria, and she immediately started checking our injuries. She cleaned the deep cut on Zoe's leg with something that made her hiss in pain. My ankle had swollen up so bad I couldn't get my shoe off without cutting the laces. Valeria wrapped it tight with an elastic bandage, while telling Xavier to get us some water and blankets from the storage room. Once we were sitting on plastic chairs with bottles of water, Zoe completely lost it. She started sobbing and apologizing over and over for making us take the money. She kept saying it was all her fault, and she almost got us killed for $50,000. I pulled her against me with my muddy hands still shaking. We both cried while Xavier stood at the window with a shotgun he'd pulled from under the counter. He kept checking the road like he expected Liberty and her husband to show up any second. 3 police cars pulled into the lot with their lights flashing. The cops came in with their hands on their guns until they saw us sitting there looking destroyed. A tall detective with gray hair introduced himself as Channing Holloway and asked what happened. We tried to explain about the dating app and the money offer, but it sounded crazy even to us. He looked skeptical until Zoe pulled out her phone and showed him the texts about being left in the woods. Then I showed him the $50,000 deposit in our bank account. His whole attitude changed when he saw the evidence. 2 paramedics arrived and started checking us over more carefully than Valeria had. They said my ankle needed x-rays, and Zoe's leg needed stitches. Detective Holloway said he'd meet us at the hospital to get our full statements. The ambulance ride took about 30 minutes to the regional medical center. The emergency room was mostly empty at 4 in the morning. A doctor took me for x-rays while a nurse cleaned Zoe's wound. The x-ray showed my ankle was badly sprained but not broken. They put me in a walking boot and gave me crutches. Zoe needed 12 stitches in her leg, where she'd caught it on something sharp while running. The doctor took photos of all our injuries and filled out some kind of assault documentation form. Detective Holloway showed up with a laptop while we were waiting for discharge papers. He opened it to show us social media profiles and asked if we recognized anyone. Liberty's perfect face stared back at us from the screen. Same with her husband's profile. These were the exact same photos they'd used on the dating app to contact us. Holloway said units were already heading to the manor address we'd given him. He sat down, and his face got serious. That couple you encountered tonight belongs to one of the oldest families in the county. He explained they had money going back generations and connections everywhere. But he also said there had been 3 missing persons cases in the past 5 years that might connect to them. Young couples who disappeared after meeting people online for dates. We were the first ones to make it out and report what happened. He left to coordinate with the units at the manor. Around 6 in the morning, he called to say they'd arrested Liberty and her husband at their estate. The cops found the hunting dogs and equipment plus the knives. But within an hour, 2 expensive lawyers from the city showed up. Liberty and her husband were claiming the whole thing was consensual roleplay that we'd agreed to. They said we got scared and made up this story. The prosecutor came to see us at the hospital that afternoon. She was a woman in her 40s who looked tired but determined. She explained that without more evidence, it would come down to our word against theirs. But she said our injuries were well documented, and Xavier's witness statement about seeing them chase us with knives would help. She was going to push for attempted murder charges plus kidnapping and assault. She warned us their lawyers would try to make us look like gold diggers who were trying to extort the rich couple. Xavier and Valeria showed up as we were getting ready to leave. They said they'd been talking and wanted us to stay at their house for a few days. We were too scared to go back to our apartment since Liberty and her husband knew where we lived. Valeria said she could check my ankle and change Zoe's bandages. Their guest room was small, but clean with a bed that felt safe. Neither of us could sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Liberty smile when she said Zoe was fun to hunt. Every noise outside made us both jump. Valeria brought us soup and checked my ankle swelling every few hours. The next morning, Detective Holloway called while I was trying to eat some toast. He said the search team found something bad at the manor. They'd broken into a locked room in the basement and found personal items like wallets and jewelry from at least 3 other people. The items were old, some going back years. He said DNA testing would take time, but it looked like Liberty and her husband had done this before. The other victims were never found. My stomach turned and I dropped the toast on the floor. Zoe heard me gasp and came over to listen. Holloway said they were treating this as a serial case now, and we were lucky to be alive. After he hung up, we just sat there staring at nothing. Our bank account still showed the $50,000 when I checked it on my phone, but Holloway had warned us it would be frozen as evidence. We were broke again, but at least we were breathing. Zoe climbed into my lap and we held each other for hours without saying anything about what almost happened. Xavier knocked and brought us sandwiches, but we couldn't eat. The next day, our phones started ringing nonstop. Somehow the media had picked up the story, and every reporter in the state wanted to talk to us. The news was calling it a story about wealthy predators hunting desperate people for sport. Liberty's family released a statement through their lawyer calling us gold diggers trying to extort them. They said we were lying about everything to get money from their innocent children. Zoe threw her phone against the wall when she read it. A woman from the prosecutor's office came to see us that afternoon. She was a victim's advocate who explained our rights and helped us file for a protective order. Liberty and her husband had made bail already, which made my skin crawl. The advocate said they couldn't come within 500 feet of us, but we should still be careful. She advised us to change our routines and think about moving somewhere else for safety. We didn't have money to move, but she said there might be funds available to help. 2 weeks passed with us mostly hiding at Xavier's house. Then the prosecutor called with big news. Another survivor had come forward after seeing the story on TV. It was a woman from 2 years ago who'd escaped the same way we did, but never reported it because she was too scared. Her story matched ours exactly, even down to the 10-minute head start they gave her. The prosecutor said this changed everything and made the case much stronger. She'd been living in another state but was willing to testify. The grand jury met 3 weeks after that. We had to go to the courthouse and tell our story again, to a room full of strangers. Liberty and her husband weren't there, but their lawyers were taking notes on everything we said. The other survivor testified too, and you could see the jury members getting angry as they heard the same pattern repeated. After 2 days of testimony, the grand jury indicted Liberty and her husband on multiple counts of attempted murder, kidnapping, and assault with a deadly weapon. Their lawyers tried to get the charges reduced to simple assault, but the judge denied it right away. Trial was set for 6 months out, which felt like forever. The Victim Compensation Fund gave us enough money to put a deposit on a small apartment 2 towns over. It wasn't much, but it had working locks and felt safer than staying near where Liberty knew to look for us. I got a job at a warehouse loading trucks, and Zoe found work at a grocery store stocking shelves. We were starting over from nothing, but at least we were together. The nightmares were bad, though. I'd wake up running through the woods or hearing dogs behind me. Zoe would shake in her sleep and call out for help. We started therapy twice a week with a counselor who specialized in trauma. She helped us work through both the attack and the money desperation that had led us there in the first place. Some days, we could barely get through a session without breaking down. Other days felt like we were making progress. The counselor said trauma responses were normal and would get better with time and work. 3 months in, Detective Holloway called with an update that made everything worse. The FBI had gotten involved because they'd connected Liberty and her husband to at least 5 missing persons cases over the past decade. All young couples who'd vanished after meeting people online. The pattern was always the same. What we'd survived was apparently something they'd been doing for years. The FBI agent who took over the case said we were incredibly lucky, and our testimony would be crucial for getting justice for the others who didn't make it out. 4 months into therapy, something shifted. Zoe and I were finally able to sit together and actually talk about that night, without completely shutting down. We could say the words out loud about what happened in the woods, and what we thought was going to happen. We were working on forgiving ourselves for taking the money, and forgiving each other for the choices we'd made. The counselor said trauma could either break relationships apart, or forge them stronger if both people did the work. We were fighting hard for the second option. Every week got a little bit easier even though we knew the trial was coming, and we'd have to face them again. Xavier started calling every few days to check on us, and Valeria would bring over food she'd made even though we lived 2 towns away now. They'd drive 30 minutes just to drop off a casserole or see how we were doing. Sunday dinners at their place became a regular thing where we'd sit in their kitchen and talk about normal stuff like the weather or sports, or anything except what happened. They treated us like family instead of victims, which meant more than I can explain. When the trial date finally came 6 months later, they both took time off work to be there and testified about finding us bloody and scared that night. The prosecutor called us to the stand on day 2, and my hands shook so bad I could barely raise them for the oath. I had to sit there and describe every detail from getting in the limo to running through the woods while Liberty stared at me with those cold, dead eyes from the defense table. Her husband kept smirking like this was all a joke to him. Zoe testified after me and broke down crying when she had to describe being dumped in the woods and hunted. Their lawyers tried to make it sound like we'd agreed to some kinky role play that got out of hand, and then changed our minds afterward when we wanted more money. They brought up our money problems, and the $50,000 deposit like that proved we were willing participants. The prosecutor had to object over and over as they tried to twist everything we said. Day 3 brought the other survivor to the stand, and when she described her experience from 2 years ago, several jurors gasped, because it was exactly the same as ours down to the 10-minute head start in the hunting dogs. She'd been too scared to report it, but seeing our story on the news gave her courage to come forward. The prosecutor then showed all the evidence they'd found at the manor, including personal items from 5 missing people who were never found, and detailed maps of the woods with hunting routes marked. The FBI agent testified about the pattern of couples who'd gone missing after meeting people online over the past decade. Liberty's lawyer tried to argue the items could have belonged to anyone, and the maps were for regular hunting, but you could see the jury wasn't buying it. Both sides gave closing arguments on day 4, with the defense still trying to paint us as gold diggers, while the prosecutor laid out the clear pattern of predatory behavior. The judge sent the jury to deliberate that afternoon, and we spent 5 days waiting in agony for them to decide. Every time the phone rang, we jumped thinking it was the verdict. Finally, on the 5th day, they called us back to court, and when the jury foreman stood up, my whole body was shaking. Guilty on all counts including attempted murder, kidnapping, and assault with a deadly weapon. Liberty screamed that we'd ruined her life and destroyed her family as the bailiffs put her in handcuffs. Her husband just glared at us, with pure hate in his eyes. The judge sentenced them both to 40 years to life with no chance of parole for 25 years. After the criminal trial ended, we filed a civil suit, and their lawyer settled out of court for an undisclosed amount rather than go through another trial. We used some of the money to keep going to therapy twice a week, because we still needed help dealing with everything. We started a small emergency fund, so we'd never be that desperate for money again. The rest went to a nonprofit that helps people who survived trafficking and kidnapping, because we wanted something good to come from all this pain. Money would never feel the same to us, after what we'd done to get it, and almost died for it. About a year after that night, we were both working steady jobs that didn't pay great but covered our bills. I was still at the warehouse, and Zoe had moved up to assistant manager at the grocery store. We'd made some real friends at work who knew our story, because it had been all over the news but treated us normal anyway. The nightmares weren't as bad anymore, though we both still had them sometimes. We adopted a rescue dog from the shelter, a big German Shepherd mix named Bear who'd been abused and abandoned, just like we'd been hunted and left for dead. He slept by our bed every night and would wake us up if we started having bad dreams by licking our faces. Having him made us feel safer at home and gave us something to take care of besides ourselves. Xavier and Valeria invited us to have our vow renewal in their backyard, since they'd become like parents to us through everything. We only invited a handful of people we really trusted, including Detective Holloway, who'd worked so hard on our case. Zoe wore a simple white sundress, and I wore jeans and a button-up shirt because we didn't need anything fancy anymore. We promised each other we'd never let money or desperation make our choices again, and that we'd always talk through big decisions together. Detective Holloway gave a little speech about how we were the strongest survivors he'd met in 20 years of police work. Life wasn't perfect after everything, because we still jumped when we heard unexpected noises, and we couldn't go near any woods without panicking. But most days we were genuinely happy just doing normal boring things like grocery shopping or watching TV with Bear on the couch. We'd survived something that should have killed us, and now every regular day felt like a gift we'd earned by fighting to stay alive that night. Thanks for hanging in there with me through all the questioning and wondering. Really enjoyed exploring these moments right alongside you all. Subscribe for more content like this.